Welcome back to our series on the Ten Commandments. Today we are looking at commandment number 2. Don't make any carved images. So let's talk about what that means right now. As a way of introducing this commandment, let's talk about creativity. Human beings are ridiculously creative. You may not think you are, but you are, because why else did you name your cat Princess Tinklefeathers? No, I mean, seriously, why did you do that? We are constantly making things. We're making skyscrapers and smartphones and space shuttles and space operas. And not everything we make is great, like Android phones, but they testify to our attempt at being creative. And creativity is our way of exercising dominion over creation. We move trees and organize plants the way we want them. We colonize with creativity. We civilize with creativity. But the problem is sometimes the creators are being recreated by their creations. If you can get that straight. Knowing this, God gave us the second commandment. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water below. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, and so on. Now, it's hard to talk about this commandment today because it's not like any of us are sitting in our basements trying to 3D print some idols. When we talk about idols, it's always idols we think that are in somebody else's life, like, you need to turn off that TV, it's becoming an idol. So what is idolatry anyway? Augustine said that idolatry is worshiping anything that ought to be used, or using anything that is meant to be worshipped. And God warns us about two things in the second commandment. First, he warns us against using God. Second, he warns us about worshiping creation. So how do we use God? It's only natural as creative beings that there's a danger that we might try and create God in our image, that we might try and see him as we want him to be and not as he is. At Mount Sinai, it didn't take long for the Israelites to make a golden calf. And they said, this golden calf is the God which brought us out of Egypt. They took the invisible God and made a form of him that was tangible, something they could move and control, something that was within their power. And that is a very human temptation. This commandment reminds us that God is transcendent. He is out of our control. Anne Lamott once wrote, you can safely assume that you've created God in your own image when it turns out that God hates all the same people you do. What God is after here is simple. Let God be God in your life. Don't try to tame him or control him or limit him or define him. And how much do we worship our creations? In Daniel 4:30, we see Nebuchadnezzar in his palace. He's the king of Babylon. He's looking out at the impressive buildings he has built. And he says, is this not the great Babylon that I have built by my own mighty strength and for my majestic honor? Or, as a theologian Darth Vader once said about the Death Star,
don't be too proud of this technological terror you've constructed.
In other words, maybe we can just appeal to Isaiah 2:8. Their land is full of worthless idols. They worship the product of their own hands. God is concerned that we would have too much pride in our skyscrapers and our iPhones and our science and these things that we have created or discovered, and we would love and trust and need those things to occupy the place in our lives that God should occupy. Why is this bad? Because we have a tendency of becoming what we worship. Greg Beale once said, what people revere, they resemble, either for ruin or for restoration. That's a great preachery line with all those R's. An idol doesn't have to be made of stone. You make an idol wherever or whenever the ambition of your heart falls short of God. To appeal to Tim Keller, he once said, when anything in life is an absolute requirement for your happiness and self-worth, it is essentially an idol, something you are actually worshiping. And Keller goes on and cuts to the point when he says, when people say, I know God forgives me, but I just can't forgive myself, they mean that they have failed an idol whose approval is more important than God's. Or to turn to Martin Luther puts it this way. There has never been a nation so wicked that it did not establish and maintain some sort of worship. The pagans who put their trust in power and dominion exalted Jupiter as their supreme god. Others who strove for riches and happiness and pleasure and the good life venerated Hercules and Mercury and Venus or others. They all made a god out of what their heart most desired. We all have this tendency to enthrone what enthralls us. And that's my preachery line. The second commandment is less worried that you'll stop worshiping God than that you will live your life with a divided heart. When a person cheats on their spouse, it's not always because they just don't care about their spouse. They don't care about hurting their kids. They often tell you that they love their spouse and they love their kids. But they also love this other person, or they love what this other person can give them. And that's living with a divided heart. God doesn't want us to live with a divided heart. So the second commandment calls us toward having a whole heart, to be whole, toward being mindful of how easy it is to worship the things we've made, to be in collective awe of our own accomplishments, our own technological innovations, so that we live with a divided heart. God is calling us toward wholeness, and we achieve wholeness when we organize our world based on creation order. The Creator should not serve the creation. We should not make our Creator into a creation. We allow God to be God in our lives. We don't let our own achievements or inventions or desires become gods. We live our lives focused and with a whole heart. And then we know, say it with me, the best is yet to come.